gosh, I started in the wrong place. Y'all saw nothing. Here we go.
Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, oh, oh. There's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life.
Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to SassafrasCast, a podcast full of witchy insights to help you lead your sassiest life. I am Rorie Kelly, a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In just a moment, we are going to begin the Witchy Weather Report. But first, a shout out to my patrons. If you didn't know, you can support this podcast at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. I record these episodes live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one. Hello, friends. So that they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them answered in real time. This is a live recorded podcast, and I try to do minimal editing, and that's both a choice for myself and the amount of hours I wish to spend on producing the podcast and wanting to put out the podcast more often rather than edit it endlessly. And also a choice for the flow of the podcast and how I would like it to feel, which is like one of my live broadcasts. I'm a live streamer, both as a tarot reader and as a musician. And for me, the flow of a live broadcast, especially when there are people tuned in and we're having a back and forth, is really special. So if you would like to be a part of that, patrons also get access to my Discord server where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and a shout out in every episode. And you can join at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot. Here is a shout out to my current patrons. Here we go. Thank you so much, Amanda Curry, Melissa Marie, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Millie Orozco, Rebecca Jones, Brittany, Hannah Westlock, Jennifer McPhail, Ondine PM, singer-songwriter, vocals and guitar for PM Edition, and Melissa Longo, poet, who just joined up. Hello, Melissa. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you. If you'd like to be a part of this, you can. Patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot will get you there for $1 a month or more. There's different things available at different tiers. And if you just want to follow the podcast, that's great too. I'm delighted however you choose to engage. Today we're talking about romance and whimsy. I'm very excited about this broadcast. This has been a topic I've been cultivating in my life this summer, and I wanted to focus on it. I wanted to focus on what it feels like to cultivate these things in our lives as adults, because I think it can feel kind of easy to access romance and whimsy when we are younger and maybe have our needs met, without us having to, kind of sell our days in order to get our needs met, and don't have maybe the same level of adult concerns and responsibilities as we do now. And I think it's worth cultivating romance and whimsy in your life at all ages. I think it's healthy for us emotionally and physically. It keeps our brains active. It keeps our brains more plastic. There is some evidence that play can help heal trauma. So there's a million reasons to do it, most of which for me is because I friggin' want to feel that way. I want to feel joyful. I want to feel like the universe is holding my hand. I want to feel like I am going on an adventure that is unfolding anew every single day. And if you'd like to feel that way too, that is what we're talking about today. Let's get started with the Witchy Weather Report. I will be reading for you from my go-to tarot deck at the moment, the Way Home Tarot, which is by Bakara Wintner and Autumn Whitehurst. And I've been reading with this deck for the last 4 or 5 months pretty exclusively. Especially at tarot parties, I do bring other decks out, but this is the one that has caught my fancy at the moment, and giving myself permission to dive into that deck, to just dive into something that catches my fancy and go all in on it is, for me, is part of cultivating romance, to allow myself to feel delighted by something instead of trying to rein myself in. So I will also talk a little bit, if you're listening to this in anything resembling real time, I'm broadcasting live for my patrons on September 14th. This will probably come out within a week of that, so by September 21st. So we're right around the beginning of an eclipse season, which is interesting. May you live in interesting times. It can be that kind of interesting. It can also be very cathartic, and it can teach us a lot about ourselves. We are coming right up on a full moon in my sign, the sign of Virgo. I believe the full moon's in Virgo. Where's the new moon in Virgo? Well, whatever. We have a full moon coming up. And we are in Virgo season. And for a lot of people, this particular moment in time has been about self-discovery and specifically uncovering what works and what doesn't. And we're gearing up, and some people have already started kind of creating a new chapter in our lives around that newfound information. So I liken this a little bit to how we all felt coming out of quarantine, which, depending on where you live, happened at different times, and depending also, of course, on like how you felt about quarantine and all of that, and what you did for a living, all these number of factors. But all of us had a period of time where we were more closed off from the rest of the world during, 2020 and beyond, and had to sit with our thoughts and had to experience different things, emotionally that perhaps we had been too busy to notice during the months and years leading up to it. And as a result, when we kind of collectively emerged as a society, many of us had big night energy, KNIGHT. Many of us had processed some inner lessons and were ready, like very ready, like raring to kind of go work out those lessons and live their new life in real time. Many of us were ready not to return to normal, but to find a new, better normal. And that involved some level of questing. And I'm here to tell you we're in a similar energy bubble right now, where over since I would say like the last Mercury retrograde and over the summer, many people have been having that kind of evaluation, often enforced by life events. And I tell you this as someone who is kind of vaguely tuned into astrology, but also especially as a tarot reader. This is true of everyone I've read for, and I read for a lot of people. I don't just read for a certain bubble of people who are interested in tarot, because I do many parties and events where I'm kind of the entertainment. So I get this kind of interesting cross-section where I'm reading for many, many people at once, and I do see patterns. And the pattern I've been seeing is a lot of people are at either the end of a chapter or the beginning of a chapter. There's that precipice energy where we've been learning lessons from the events of the recent past, or perhaps are continuing to learn them and continuing to tie up the loose ends of that chapter, and are ready to move forward into a future where we actualize those lessons, where we say, here's what I've learned, and here's how I choose to go forward. Here are the new choices I make. So that's kind of just a moment in time reference for you if you're listening to this, like I said, around the time of my broadcast and release, which is the second or third week of September in 2024. A lot of people around you are going through those big life changes right now. Let's pull a card for everyone. And my intent when I pull this card is that whenever and wherever it finds you, that it have something of value to offer to you. Here we go. I'm shuffling. We have the Chariot. The energy now is like go, go, go. The energy is go despite all odds. We can see, I think this fish is meant to be a salmon, although I'm not sure. Here on this card, which you can't see if you're listening to the podcast, but if you want to tune in for the video version, you absolutely can. It's on YouTube. We have a salmon depicted amongst very like rushing, turbulent water, and the salmon is kind of like leaping into the air, and it's got this expression on its face. I mean, if you can read the expression of a fish, which I'm choosing to feel that I can, that's like, you can't stop me. And that's the energy of salmon in a big way, because when it is salmon spawning season, they actually fight their way back up river to go to pursue romance and whimsy, to like go, get together with the other salmon and start a fresh breed of baby new salmons, and they like fight their way upriver, and not everyone makes it. And by the end, some of the salmon are like like worse for wear, like actually like beaten up, like deformed in some ways by the water. And it's just this level of determination that like no matter what happens, I'm going to get there. And the Chariot always has that push and pull. It has that nothing can stop me, I don't care what you throw at me energy. On the Smith Waite deck, drawn by Pamela Coleman Smith, we notice that the Chariot is pulled by two powerful animals, but the Chariot itself doesn't have wheels. It's just like a chair. And yet we have this sense of like, it's coming, it's going, it's moving. And so it really gives this push and pull of like, it's our sheer will, not wool, we're not sheeps. It's our sheer will that is carrying us forward at this time. Like nothing can stop us if our will is in alignment. And so be aware of that. Like it's a powerful time. It's a time when we are like able to be manifestors. It's a time when we are able to move forward very, very powerfully to move the plot along in our personal stories. And so be aware of your own potential to do that so that you can harness it for what you really want. And I really encourage you to think about, and this episode may help you with this, what you really want, not what you think you should want. Because disorganized manifestation is just that. When we're like, oh, I mean, I feel like what I should be going after is XYZ, right? Insert goal here that may feel like socially sanctioned or more sensible or whatever it is. We should ourselves to death. We should all over ourselves. And what happens is we do manifest some of it, and we also manifest that feeling of, yeah, I guess I should want this, but that feeling of ambivalence, because really what we deeply feel passionate about may be something else. Or maybe it's simply that we don't feel deeply passionate about this want that we think we should feel passionate about, right? So I urge you to get in touch with for real, what your desires are, because you have a right to go after your real desires instead of just the ones you think you should go after. And when we do that, when we bring together our will and this powerful, potent, unstoppable energy with how we really, really feel, with our big feelings, with what we feel deep in our hearts, we truly are unstoppable. So that's the energy of the moment. Be the chariot you wish to see in the world. Let's talk about romance and whimsy. This is our topic of the day. So we associate romance and whimsy with youth, and that means that there are people, and I personally don't find them people I want to spend time with. There are people who discount romance, and when I speak of romance, by the way, I'm not limiting it to like romantic coupling. I'm not limiting it to love interests, although I do think that can be a part of it. When I speak of romance, I'm speaking, if anyone has ever read Anne of Green Gables, if you haven't, what are you even doing with your life? It's an incredible book. I read it as an adult, so you don't have to be a kid to appreciate it. Anne Shirley's approach to life is a very romantic one. Anne Shirley is the main character in Anne of Green Gables, and she is an orphan who has had a difficult life, but she has a very rich imagination. She has a very rich daydreaming life, and she persists in projecting romance onto the world around her. And so when we talk about romance, I'm talking about that Anne of Green Gables kind of romance where it's like, yeah, that cherry tree outside my window isn't a tree. She's a secret queen, and her name is the Snow Queen. And, and she names different things in that way, giving them these romantic qualities so that the ordinary of our life takes on this special, glimmering shininess. And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about romance. And yeah, we feel those feelings around love connections or potential love connections. And I think though, it's a mistake, especially in our adult lives, to limit those feelings to love. In fact, I think it's a little like how when we put all of our eggs in the basket of one romantic relationship must meet all my needs. And I'm not saying this as an anti-monogamy thing. I'm a monogamous person. Although I will say that there's a lot of discourse coming from the polyamorous community that has been really healthy and helpful for me as a monogamous person, just around like, you don't need one person to meet every need you have, and putting all that pressure on someone puts a lot of pressure on the relationship. Similarly, when we put pressure on whatever our current romantic entanglement is to be the thing that gives us spark, to be the thing that brings joy into our lives, to be the thing that makes us feel alive and special, that puts a lot of pressure on that relationship. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask of just one person in your life. When instead we have the option, and always have, of simply carrying ourselves through the world in a romantic way, of treating the world as though it is a beautiful story and adventure that is unfolding before our very eyes. And yes, in every story and adventure, there are dangers, there are perils, there are times when we have to prove ourselves. But that too is romantic, right? We think about tales of honor and glory, and all of them involve the protagonist having to prove themselves against these difficult circumstances. And so when we are going through difficult circumstances, injecting a little bit of romance into our lives can really, really help us move through, because instead of slogging through something that feels very terrible, instead we're like, I'm the main character in this story and I'm about to face my dragon, and we are, and it allows us to see things from this context of like, well, we know in the story the hero gets through. The hero just has to be tried and tested, right? And so we're being tried and tested, but we're a hero, damn it. We're going to get through. So when we inject romance into our lives, it helps us both when times are good as well as when times are really, really not good. So I'm here to advocate for romance and whimsy. I'm here to advocate for being playful, hopeful, excited at any age. And I'm here to tell you that if you're someone who has this idea that like, oh, that was youth, I think too, this is where I hear a lot of people, I hear a lot of mainstream privileged people, by which I mean people who are straight, white, cisgendered, and haven't experienced like big life traumas in their youth. Say like, oh, the best years of your life are in high school, or the best years of your life are, like before you turn 20 or whatever it is, and those of us who did not have incredibly, glamorous childhoods are all like, you couldn't pay me to go back. And this is not like me drawing like an us and them dividing line, right? But it is to say that I think that part of the reason there are people who feel that way is because when we come of age, we kind of get these adult responsibilities we have to face. We learn that life is bigger in a way that feels overwhelming rather than a way that feels romantic. And we feel this sense of overwhelm, and there's a sense of, oh, I have to put away the childish things because this is the real world now. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we do that, when we put away our romance, when we put away our whimsy, when we put away our hopeful, playful nature. And the happiest people I know are willing to be hopeful and playful through life. And as an adult, I can tell you that those people are people who have done the work. Those people are people who have faced their shadows, who have slain that particular dragon, or at least gotten to know that dragon, and live in an interesting détente with it. We feel most playful, hopeful, and excited actually when we have been through the hard stuff, when we have shown up bravely for it, just like the character in a novel shows up bravely for the hard stuff and is rewarded, not just externally by perhaps receiving accolades or getting the happy ending, but internally by growing into someone who is more capable of great deeds, of great acts, of resilience, of strength. Furthermore, in case you needed more evidence of why romance and whimsy is joyful, there is some real evidence that it helps us stay young. Like physically, it keeps the brain more plastic. I've read studies as well that when we expose people to the era in their lives in which they were young and joyful, by like surrounding them with the music of the era and media from the era and like technology that matches the era as opposed to newer technology. Literally, there was a study that was done with senior citizens, putting them into a house like this for a period of time. And during that time, they were not really allowed to acknowledge the modern world. They were like kind of instructed to live as though they were in this time period when they were younger. And all of these different measurable physical gains were had. It wasn't just, there was a big impact on memory and short-term memory and cognitive functioning, which is always a concern as you're getting older. But there were things like people's mobility increased. There were people who were able to get around better without a mobility aid. There were people who were able to, whose strength was increased, whose stamina was increased. All of these actual measurable effects done by a physical before and after. And so it's really this fascinating window to me when I read studies like that onto what is possible with the power of our minds and the power of our imagination and the power of our perspective. I've also read recently about a study that shows that people who are going through a traumatic period in their lives, playing a video game like Tetris can actually reduce the long-term effects of that trauma. So literally making time for play in a difficult traumatic period actually means you have a better outcome long-term, not just right now. Because that's always the thing about trauma. We get through difficult periods, but they come back to us. That's literally how trauma works, right? We get through the traumatic thing, however we kind of have to. And then years later, it still comes back to us because of all of the kind of emotional unfinished business that our body has held on to. And there's some evidence now that play, and specifically those types of video games that are like, engaging but not such high stakes that they make you crazy, like Tetris, can actually improve those long-term trauma outcomes, can reduce ongoing trauma from a situation. So that's really interesting. And I'm just here to say that I am a strong believer in play. I'm a strong believer in daydreaming. I'm a strong believer in romance and whimsy. And I may be saying that because I'm a workaholic and I need them. I need them desperately. So let's talk about how to cultivate the sense of romance, the sense of whimsy in your life. We're going to be talking today about showing up for our inner Page of Cups. And I've chosen to use that framework. I'm using the Page of Cups and describing to you a character from the tarot. Originally, I was talking about inner child. And, hi, Brittany. Brittany's tuned in and says, play, romance, and whimsy are so underrated. Highly agree. Originally, when I was kind of making the notes for the show, I was like, we're showing up for our inner child, which I think is part of it. But the Page of Cups is bigger. The Page of Cups is about our creativity, our vulnerability, our self-expression. The Page of Cups may be a child, may be an adolescent, may even be someone who is an adult, but who has been opened up to the romance of life. And I want to give us room to look at all those aspects of ourselves, especially as a creative person. I talk, I think, a lot about Julia Cameron on this podcast because she has been a big influence on me and a lot of people I know. She wrote The Artist's Way, and she talks about our inner artist and showing up for the artist within. And that is the Page of Cups. So I'm going to be talking about our inner Page of Cups and know that it encompasses all of that. Our inner child, our inner adolescent, our inner vulnerable self, our inner artist. All of the above, our inner, oh my God, what's happening? Am I going to go on that roller coaster right now? Our inner that voice. So here are some common denominators of times that I have felt more romantic and whimsical in my life. I'm going to go through them quickly, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to cultivate each of these things in our day-to-day life. And then I'm going to give you, in which you got this, I'm going to give you a morning ritual for a deliciously romantic and whimsical day, which is something I've been trying to practice because this is the kind of thing that does require attention, right? We want attention when we're feeling romantic, and we want to put our attention in special places, and we want to have this special aura of possibility, and that does require daily attention. And I don't want to say daily maintenance because it shouldn't feel like work. It should feel good and exploration-y, which is a perfectly real and cromulent word. So here are the common denominators. I've been thinking about this a great deal this summer. Times I felt most romantic and whimsical in my life, first of all, often comes after a bad period. After I've been sick, after I have had a big breakup, after I've left a toxic job. It comes after getting myself out of something that really stole the romance and whimsy from my life. It's interesting how I've often felt like a new lease on life after being unable to work for a couple days, which it takes a lot. I have to be really sick to not want to work. Because first of all, my work is my passion. Secondly, I'm kind of a workaholic. When I'm so unwell that I literally, like, all I can do is kind of like be on a soft surface and watch Netflix and drink fluids, I often feel very, very excited about life afterwards, having come out of that darker period. Having had cathartic realizations, which kind of goes hands in hand. When we face the darkness, we're able to move into the light. We need the darkness to understand the light. And there's nothing wrong with a path of moderation. And also, it's important to know that the darkest things that we have overcome also show us the potential for how much joy and possibility we can have in our lives. So they do perform a service for us. They're worthwhile, and sometimes they're worthwhile because we prove ourselves to ourselves, and sometimes they're worthwhile because they build compassion for a variety of reasons. But the deep capacity we have to feel shitty, there's the explicit rating, the deep capacity we have to feel shitty is matched by our capacity to feel blissful, exuberant, joyful, excited. We have that deep emotional well within us, and it can go both ways. And we do this by cultivating romance. So I've had these romantic periods after I have had dark periods, and after I have chosen me. I've chosen to step away, Eight of Cups energy, from situations and people that are toxic to me. It's important to me that I frame it that way because there's a lot of pressure right now, and maybe there always has been, but like armchair psychology, and it's like we almost feel more validated if we're walking away from an environment or a person, if we can say, well, it was toxic and there was narcissism and all this stuff and abuse. And while those things are real and important to walk away from, and very helpful to call out if they're happening, right? If it's truly happening, if you are experiencing abuse or narcissistic abuse or, like that kind of toxicity in your life, it's really helpful to name it. It's really helpful to acknowledge to yourself, yes, this is what I experienced. However, I also see people going like, oh, I haven't had it that bad. I don't really have a right to feel this way. And the truth is, of course you do. Something can be toxic to you without necessarily being toxic. There are people in the world that I know would not be healthy for me to be around every day. And that doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just that something about their energy and my energy would put me in a darker place and make me into someone I don't want to be. And as a result, it's healthier for me to choose to limit contact with people like that who, for me, have a toxic energy. Doesn't mean they're toxic people necessarily. It just means it's not a match for my own highest good and best mental health and who I want to be in the world. And probably vice versa, So these are all about what we're moving out of. These periods of my life naturally come on when I'm when I'm overcoming, when I'm moving out of the negativity, when I have faced the darkness and have chosen the light for myself. Let's talk about what we are moving into. What happens at these times is I begin to show up better for my basic needs and stability. There's an energy of like, well, anything can happen. And as a result, I'm choosing to show up for my stability because that is a way to give myself better resilience. And I deserve it. I've seen what it looks like to worry that my stability will not be there, that my needs will not be met. And I'm choosing to meet those needs. Now I'm choosing to show up for it. When I'm showing up for my inner Page of Cups, for my inner child, for my inner artist, for the vulnerable part of me that wants to feel excited about life, but also we're talking about vulnerability, the same part of you that can feel like, oh my God, we're going on an adventure, this is so exciting, is also the same part that can be really, really hurt by just a sharp word. Somebody can say the wrong thing to you and it can take all the wind out of your sails and make you feel so stupid and hurt. And that's the dual nature of having a romantic and vulnerable outlook on life. So we have to protect that part of ourselves. We have to be willing to show up for that part of ourselves, both by cultivating that playful, hopeful joy, and also by being the adult and saying, I'm going to take your hand. And if someone says some mean shit to you, that's about them, not about you. Got it? And when we show up as both our own protector and our own loving steward of joy, things really happen. This is about reparenting ourselves. We get better romance in our lives in every sense of the word when we're willing to reparent ourselves. And finally, when we deliberately open ourselves up to considering delicious possibilities by daydreaming, by playing positive games of what if. And this is a two-parter. We open ourselves up by not shutting it down, first of all, because a lot of people I know are like, I don't want to hope for the best because then I might get disappointed. If I expect the worst, then I could be pleasantly surprised. Except, can you? Maybe not. Because if we are spending our lives bracing against something bad happening, we may not notice when something really good happens, or when there's potential for something really good happens. We may not see the signs because we don't want to get our hopes up. And as a result, they pass us by. And that's heartbreaking. So we have to deliberately not rein ourselves in our hope. We have to allow ourselves to be hopeful. We have to allow ourselves to get our hopes up. Now, we can do this with a grain of salt. We can be like, well, our hopes don't always look the way we expect them to, but that doesn't mean our dreams can't come true. And when we trust that the universe is unfolding in ways that are surprising and delightful to us, we have primed our brain to look for things that are surprising and delightful, because the human brain, which we still don't understand that well, by the way. But one thing we do know about the human brain is that it loves an assignment. It loves to look for what you tell it to look for. And it's also primed to look for danger, because that kept us from being eaten by a lion at earlier stages in our evolution. Most of us, not all of us, most of us are not in imminent danger of being eaten by a lion in our day-to-day lives. It's no longer necessarily relevant, but it's hardwired. It's a part of our evolution. And I will say, in some ways, it really is still relevant, right? Like the modern day lions for a woman, I'm sorry, are men. Now, that doesn't mean like hashtag not all men. It doesn't mean every man is a lion or dangerous. It does mean, though, that every woman I know has had an experience where a man has either really frightened her or actively abused or harassed her or assaulted her. And so as a result, our brains are now hardwired to be like, that's one of those, they could hurt us again. And that's evolutionary, and it's correct, right? Just as you might not want to go into a bad neighborhood without whatever, like maybe locking your car doors or being a little more cautious or whatever, and you'll think twice about what streets you go down if they're not well lit. That's not because it's not an indictment of every person who lives in that neighborhood, right? It's not like everyone in this neighborhood is evil. No, it's just that this is a place where I've heard some things can happen, and I'm going to make a wise choice and try to protect myself against those things happening. So yeah, we do have modern day lions, right? And for women, modern day lions might be men, and for people of color, and especially Black people, unfortunately, law enforcement is our modern day lions, right? It's heartbreaking that, Black parents have to raise their children to have a certain type of incredible politeness and fear of authority figures, because it's true that Black people get shot by the cops. And so we do have these modern day lions. And I know I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent, but our brain is doing us a service by looking out for danger, is what I'm saying. This is an evolutionary thing. It's designed to keep us safe. However, we do have the capacity for rational thought, and we do have the option of saying, hey, brain, continue to look out for lions, right? Whatever your lion may be. But let's also look out for joy. Let's also look out for possibilities. We have the ability to do this, and our brain is very, very willing to be tuned in to what we say. It's that exercise where we're like, try not to think of an elephant, and all you can do is think of an elephant immediately, right? Our brain is like, you said elephant? Yeah, let's talk about elephants, baby. Or when you suddenly learn about a band, that you haven't heard before because someone recommends a song or something, and you're like, oh, wow, I've never heard of them. And then for the next week, it's like you hear their song everywhere. And by the end of it, you're like, wow, I've heard of them every minute, right? And it's not like they didn't exist before. It's now that your brain is almost ready to mark that as important and worth your attention, because our brain is constantly filtering new information in. And we can prime it. We can say ahead of time, this, and this are important, so pay attention for them. And we can do that with romance. We can say things that make us feel hopeful are important. Take a look. Let's pay attention to that. Things like possibilities and possible opportunities that feel delicious to us are something to pay attention for. Yes, the brain loves it when you tell it what to think about. The brain is like, dominate me. Like, yeah, let's do it. The brain's into it. Correct. So that is an important part, is deliberately opening yourself up to these possibilities by daydreaming, by playing positive games of what if. So it's a two-parter. We're not closing ourselves off, because often we do that thing. I'm not going to let my hopes get up. I'm not going to let myself get carried away. Let yourself get carried away, because you're showing your brain this is something that can happen. Oh, beautiful things. There's other studies that have shown that visualizing a thing has an effect similar to actually completing the thing in our brain in terms of giving us a dopamine release if it's something that like would do that. I suspect the same is true on the more negative side, that like we can get the cortisol release if we're thinking of something stressful happening, right? So both in terms of us getting like that kind of reward in our brain of like, wow, I did something great. So like, in visualizing, like a chance encounter with your crush, or visualizing something really neat happening. Also, it helps us with skill building, right? When we visualize, when athletes, especially, they've done a lot of tests on athletes, a lot of studies, I should say. When athletes visualize doing the task well, they tend to perform better. So in other words, mental practice can make you better in real life experience. So why wouldn't we mentally practice to have a romantic life? Why wouldn't we spend our time cultivating that skill of feeling swept off our feet, of feeling excited, of feeling joyful? If we want more of that in our lives, why would we wait for the world to come along? Why would we be the universe's bitch when we could practice, when we could be like, I'm such a Virgo right now, we can practice, we can make a study plan. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we show up for ourselves by practicing having romantic and joyful experiences? Again, broad definition of romantic here. It might be love romantic. It might be romantic in terms of your dreams, like who you want to be in the world, the mark you want to leave, getting accolades and attention that you've always dreamed of getting, having a whirlwind, like beautiful glow up day, like think about those scenes in a movie where it's like, I'm thinking about, there was that movie, That Thing You Do, which came out, I don't know, late 90s maybe. And it's about like this band that's kind of like, that era of band that like in the 60s that like gets to like, like the Beatles or whatever, like that kind of sound. And it's that era, that time. And it's about this band kind of having a glow up and having a success arc. And there's this character that Liv Tyler plays, who's like the girlfriend of one of the band members, and the manager of the band, on the day that they're like gonna have a really big show, like sends her out to like buy a beautiful new dress and like get her hair and makeup done and just like feel like she's living a fairy tale life. And you can just see her eyes just light up like, wow, this is the kind of life I can have now. And that is the energy that we should be cultivating. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we prime our brain to practice and get better at having romantic whirlwind experiences with life? I think that we should. So we can, I'm going to give you like a little bit of a to-do list. How are we going to do this? I encourage you, like, use this as journal prompts before I move on to our morning ritual. Use this as journaling prompts for you, or if you are someone who is not like a writer, use it as prompts for you to just like sit with this and think about it. We can create more romance and whimsy in our life by showing up for ourselves, both by showing up, by removing ourselves, protecting ourselves, acting as the wise adults in our lives from the darkness. When we have cathartic realizations, we pay attention to them. We show up as the brave knight who's like, I have realized this, I can't unrealize it, and now I go forward carrying this information and doing my best. As Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better, right? So we have these cathartic realizations, and we don't just have them and experience the catharsis, but we move forward going like, and now how can I apply this? It's about doing the work. When we have overcome something dark, when we remind ourselves that we can do hard things, when we do the work, we show up for ourselves even though we don't know the outcome. But sometimes we have to face something down. We don't have a choice always. Life throws us another curveball and we're like, oh, good, another growth opportunity. But when we show up for it, anyway, when we feel the fear and do it anyway, when we show up for what Brene Brown refers to as Act 2, the hard part of the play where the main character just is like assaulted with problems and they try every comfortable way to move through and they can't. They have to get uncomfortable. When we're willing to do that, when we're willing to do the work in that way, when we are willing to step away from those who drag us down. And I'm going to frame it just like that. You know what your energy is like around different people. That's not a negative thing. It's normal. We all have different versions of ourselves. I'm not just talking about masking. Although if there are people that you feel you have to mask around 24/7, that probably is not a real healthy energy for you. But we have different, even apart from that, we have different versions of ourselves. We have versions of ourselves that come out more freely depending on the company we keep. And some people's company makes us feel small and like we have to impress. And like in order to impress, we have to edit ourselves, or like we're not allowed to make a sound and we have to be seen and not heard, or like we have to please them and put our own needs aside. And some people's energy makes us light up. And some people seem to be holding up a mirror, showing us that we can do something and make us feel like, wow, it is possible for me to be great. Like, wow, I can inspire people. Wow, I could really do something meaningful. And when we choose to step away from the people who make us feel smaller, and when we choose to center our focus on the people who make us feel like life is full of possibilities, like we are full of possibilities, that is how we do the work for ourselves. And it can feel selfish, especially if you're not used to it, especially if you have come from trauma or come from abuse or learned people pleasing as a necessary skill to get you through a difficult childhood or difficult relationship. It feels selfish, and it's not selfish. It's not selfish to choose who you surround yourself with and to choose the people who make you feel good. Because when we feel good, we can leave our most potent mark on the world. And when we feel small and closed up, we don't have access to that part of us. So when we choose to deny our gifts, which is what we do when we stay around people who make us feel small, we're denying our gifts. We're saying my gifts don't matter. I just have to toe the line right now. We're denying the whole world of all the beautiful things we could bring into it. And that's a shame. So remember that it's not selfish. It's never selfish to stay away from people who make you feel small. That's doing the work. It's a two-parter. So how can you do that work? How can you show up for cathartic realizations? How can you show up bravely when life puts an obstacle in front of you? And how can you bravely say, I'm moving away from the people who make me feel small, and I'm moving towards the people who make me feel big? Or another way to put it might be, who do I feel like the most joyful version of myself around? Who do I feel like the best version of myself around? And see what that feels like. And when I say best, I mean like you're loving life. Who do I feel in love with life around? Versus who makes me feel the opposite of that. And that's where your energy belongs. So we start by showing up for the hard stuff, and we also have to show up for the good stuff. And we have to do both samey. We can't get too lost in the hard stuff, because then we feel like we train our brain to believe we always have to be doing hard things and can never get a reprieve. So we also have to do the fun stuff. We have to show up for our basic needs and stability, because we can't have a good day if we need sleep. If we have gotten 4 hours of sleep, when what the human body needs is 8 hours, not 6 to 8 hours, not try to get around 7, 8 hours of sleep. Yes, all our bodies are different, and different people function on different levels of sleep. But a through line I have seen in almost everyone I talk to in our productivity obsessed American culture is that they think they need less sleep than they do, and they're walking around with effects of sleep withdrawal. So get enough sleep, because you can't have as good a time when you're not well rested, right? Because all you are thinking about when your needs aren't met, not just sleep, but food. And let's talk about how society has an obsession with making women in particular obsessed with taking up less space and weighing less. And how when we are literally spending our time depriving ourselves of nourishment and pushing our bodies to perform harder by exercising, that we're praised as if that's a good thing to do that, when in fact what we're doing is moving away from what our body needs. Of course we can't have a good time, because our body is so focused on the needs that are not getting met, right? So when we are meeting our basic needs, we are able to feel romantic about life, because when we're not meeting our basic needs, the only thing we're able to feel is how much we need the thing we're not getting. So we show up for our basic needs. We show up for our inner child and our inner artist. We show up for whimsy. We show up for things that make us laugh. We show up for things that just like fill us with possibility and joy just because. We show up for the vulnerable parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that are so excited, that are like, wow, do you want to write a book? Do you want to go roller skating? Do you want to make a snowman? Do you want to, like, that are just like so excited. They're like, let's do this. Let's do it together. And that part of ourselves is also vulnerable, because if the person they're asking is like, no, I don't want to do that with you, they feel terrible. It's so hurtful, because they're offering their heart and the person's like, oh, this old thing. And it's like the person literally is picking up their heart and throwing it in the garbage. So we have to show up for our inner Page of Cups. We have to show up for our inner vulnerability by saying to it, yes, I do. Yes, I do want to go to that movie with you. Yes, I do want to go on this adventure with you. Yes, I do think we should paint a picture. And also by saying to it, by counseling it like a loving parent, when it inevitably experiences the pain of rejection, because there will be people around who are shitty. There will be people around who are dealing with their own unhealed baggage, who will ridicule that part of you for being joyful and hopeful. And that's a them problem, not a you problem. However, you owe it to yourself to remind your inner vulnerable place, like, hey, that person has their own stuff. It's not about you. This is a beautiful part of you, to continue to build them up the way you would build up a small child. And finally, we deliberately open ourselves up. How can you do this? How can you open yourself up to considering these delicious possibilities in life? How can you make time for daydreaming? First of all, you have to get enough sleep if you're going to have good daydreams. Can confirm. Just as you kind of have to get enough sleep if you're going to be a meditator, because otherwise you'll just fall asleep. It's good because it's a practice that keeps you honest about the basic needs thing. Give yourself permission, give yourself time on the schedule to daydream. Give yourself time to think about, like, what if in a really delicious way. Because boy, do we, before you're like, I don't have all that time. Really? Because most of us have time to say what if in a negative way. Most of us have time to wrestle with something that's stressing us out all week long. We just find the time. We just find the time to do it. We just find the time to be like, oh man, I'm going to owe on my taxes. I don't know how much. How am I going to pay for it? I don't know. Oh man, I got to think about this. What if I can't pay my bills? What if the tax bill comes in? What if I don't pay it and then the IRS comes after me? What if it's an amount that's not in my bank account and then I have to figure it out? What if this person says something mean to me? What if I go on stage and bomb? We make time for those shitty what ifs. I know, because I hear people say it all the time, and I'm not saying, like, you're not a bad person for worrying. I'm not doing a toxic bypassing thing, right? We all worry. We're all allowed to worry, and we should be surrounding ourselves with people who, at these times when we're like overwhelmed with the negative what ifs, who can take us in hand and be like, hey, I just want to remind you how great you are and that you've gotten through other things before. We deserve to have support. So I'm not doing the toxic bypassing thing and say, don't worry. I'm merely pointing out to you that you have made the time to worry. I bet you could, if I asked you right now, what are like 2 or 3 things that you're worried about this week? I bet you could be like this, and this, and I bet you could give me like an essay on each one. So let me ask you the flip side. If I asked you right now, what are 2 or 3 things that are like delicious possibilities that you're hopeful about this week? Would you be able to give me as much detail? Would you even be able to name them? And that might be a practice that's worth cultivating. What would it look like? I actually do this when I make my schedule every week, and I list my top 3 pain points and my top 3 desires. What would it look like to give as much airtime to the things that are exciting and hopeful and joyful for you, right? We all know our worries, but it's okay to acknowledge them. Sometimes getting them out of our minds and onto paper, or out of our minds and into the air by speaking them, it helps. It's like an exorcism, we're releasing them so they can no longer sit rent-free in our brain and have power over us, right? But we need to create space as well for the opposite side of worries, for hope, for things that we're hopeful and excited about, right? If I say, what are the top 3 things you're worried about right now? You could probably come up with them real fast because you've been worrying about them. If I ask you what the top 3 things you're hopeful about right now, I'm curious what would come out. And I know for me in the past, I've been cultivating romance so I kind of have like some hopeful daydreams in my mind right now. But in the past, in times when I felt burnt out, in times when I haven't been cultivating this part of myself, what comes out when people ask me what I'm hoping for are the shoulds, not the things I'm really hopeful for, but like, well, I guess I should want this. Well, I guess I'm hoping to build my business in 2024. I guess I'm hoping to, and what comes out aren't hopes, they're goals. And there's nothing wrong with having goals, but your goals should be aligned with your hopes and not the other way around. We shouldn't default to being like, well, I guess I hope for this. Instead, we should cultivate that feeling of lit up joy and hunger and excitement, and then build our goals around that, because we deserve to have as much of that feeling as we can handle. So if you take away nothing, make time for your hopes, make time for daydreams, because you make time for worry. And maybe that's an easy way to do it. Next time you catch yourself worrying, be like, oh, tally mark. I just spent a little bit of time worrying about this thing. Next up, I have to spend a little bit of time hoping for something and daydreaming, right? Like maybe we can just keep ourselves honest that way, like tit for tat. Oh man, I just noticed that I'm worried about that party on Friday and whether I'll be really awkward and whether I will be able to find something that makes me look good instead of stupid and whether I'll make a fool of myself. I better give myself a couple minutes of romantic daydreaming today because I met my worry quota. So it's time to move over to the romance quota. Try this hack. Tell me how you feel about it. Oh, thank you. Brittany's in the comments saying, I'm getting very Brene Brown and Gretchen Rubin vibes from this episode, which I adore. I do as well. I'm a big fan of both. I gotta try and put this in the show notes, and I'm saying it to myself so I remember. Brene Brown, Gretchen Rubin, and Julia Cameron, like the holy friggin' trinity of happiness, in my opinion. I will try to put links to all three of those authors who are very worth your time and energy into the show notes, because all of them have helped me cultivate romance and whimsy in my life. All right, let's talk about giving ourselves a morning ritual for a deliciously romantic and whimsical day. And if you prefer, this could be an evening ritual for the next day, because I know some people, like I'm not a morning person personally. There are things though that I have found to be meaningful in the morning for me that it's worth putting first so that I do them. However, I don't wake up and roll out of bed on most days feeling like, yeah, I'm ready to go after life. I wake up most days and I'm like, I like bed. I don't want to get out of this cozy nest and have to like deal with the real world. Ew. So, like you choose, it doesn't have to be a first thing in the morning ritual. It could be an evening ritual for a great day the next day. It could be something that you do midday to replenish yourself. But let's give ourselves time to inject romance and whimsy into our lives. Let's deliberately seek it out. And so we could do some journaling. I'm going to give you a few different components of a morning ritual, and I want you to pick your top 3. You don't have to do all of them. It's probably too much to do all of them. And I'm living proof because I'm the person who tries to do all the things. I'm going to let you pick your top 3 for your morning ritual and spend maybe, 10, 15 minutes on each one. So we could do some journaling. Journaling is great because it allows us, especially when we do it Julia Cameron style, what she calls morning pages, which is really just freely expressing whatever comes into our brain and writing it down. It is a written form of vipassana, which, as I understand it, is a type of meditation where you allow thoughts to enter your mind, you observe them, you're aware of them, but you don't engage with them and you let them pass out, right? So you can do this type of journaling, or you can perform it as vipassana if you want, or you could do it out loud if you want. I have done my morning pages out loud to nobody in the car before. I'm encouraging you to give yourself time every day to let your thoughts rise naturally and just see what's in there. And we're not practicing self-judgment. We're just allowing ourselves to see what's in there. But naturally, what does happen is we do end up drawing some conclusions, often by the end of writing 3 pages about, like, maybe we intended to write about the day that's ahead of us, and instead we wrote about a shitty fight we had with somebody that we're looking at the page and going like, does this even deserve this much of my time? You know what, it does, because it's big enough that you're like, oh, this is affecting me more than I thought, and I better tend to myself around it, right? When we show up for our thoughts and feelings in this way, we give ourselves an opportunity for those cathartic realizations, the realization that I need this to be happy, or I need to not be around this to be happy, to feel safe. This is how I protect myself, right? So I invite you to do some journaling or some meditation. I invite you also perhaps to do some creativity, do some art therapy with your day. If you're someone who is a creative person like me, I'm a musician and I'm a writer. And so creativity is a part of my day. Like that's also, it's my calling, right? But I invite you to do some creativity, maybe especially if you're someone whose work is creative, that is just for you and not about output, not about productivity. It's just about you being creative. It's art therapy for you. I invite you to do some form of art therapy, whether it's singing or putting on some music you love and dancing, or drawing something or crafting something. I invite you to put some art therapy into your day. I invite you as well to write down or otherwise get out of you the shit that's pissing you off, right? Like make a, I'm so mad about this, or I'm so annoyed about this, or whatever negative feeling has been kind of dominant in your worry thoughts lately, in your stress brain. I invite you to like be as annoyed or upset or angry or fearful or sad as you can about it, and like either write it down and crumple. Like we're doing a mini releasing ritual now. Like top 5 things that suck. Write them down, crumple it up, rip it up, put it in, like flush it down the toilet. If, you know, like you want to rip it up real small because you don't want to clog your toilet, that's a new problem. Then you'll be writing about that the next day. Flush it down the toilet, burn it safely. Do not set your house on fire, you know, like whatever. But your goal here is to write down the stuff that suck and basically be like, I'm angry about this. I'm allowed to. And also I'm not giving it any power over me. I smush it, right? We are doing a mini releasing ritual by saying, yes, these things have affected me, but no, I am not beholden. I'm bigger than them. I smush them literally, right? Give yourself a mini releasing ritual. Show up for your basic needs by doing a body check-in. Again, remember, I'm giving you a long list of things. You don't try to do all of them. Pick your top 3. Show up for your basic needs by doing a body check-in. How does it feel from your head to your toes to your head, or just like, close your eyes and tune into your body and let your attention drift to the part of your body that wants attention. Maybe it feels painful. Maybe it feels itchy. Maybe there's just like a weird floaty feeling in your belly. Just pay attention. Just listen to your body and ask it when you've been listening for a while. How can I love you today? And it might be like, get some fucking sleep. Or it might be like, I'm hungry. Or it might be like, I've been scared for the last 8 days. Can we do something about that? And you know you have an emotional thing going on, right? But tune into your body and ask it how you can love it better. And then we do the same thing for our inner child or inner artist. We ask ourselves, our inner vulnerable self, the part of ourselves that feels romantic, that feels vulnerable, that feels hope and fear, both things, 2 sides of the same coin. We ask ourselves, how can I love you today? What would feel delicious to you today? And finally, we deliberately open ourselves up to delicious possibilities by doing a little bit of daydream. This is like, if you only choose 3 things, I hope this is one of them. Do some daydreaming. Think about your day and ask yourself, what delicious surprise could be waiting for me today? And the more creative you get, the more bonus points I will give you on this one. What delicious surprise could be waiting for me today? The only rule is it has to truly feel really good. It shouldn't be something that you think someone is supposed to want. What would truly make you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited? And it might feel hard to come up with this at first. You might not know what you want at first. And this is a practice. This is a muscle that builds with time. What would feel really delicious today? I was doing a tarot party on Wednesday, and it was like a cocktail party, and it was like fancy dress. And I get worried about that stuff sometimes because I'm like, my self-concept is that I'm a very casual person. I am a casual person. I'm wearing pajama bottoms under this. You can't see it if you're watching the video because you're only seeing me from the chest up. But, you know, yes, I live casually. And I always get this sense of imposter syndrome when I'm at fancy events. I'm like, everyone's going to know, you know? Everyone's going to know that I'm faking and that I'm not good enough or whatever, you know? Instead, on Wednesday, I was able to just ask myself, what could be delicious about this? What if going to this cocktail party, like, what if I put something on my body that just made me feel so alive and vibrant, that just made me feel like the hottest, coolest, simultaneously hot and cool, like neatest version of myself? What if I was like, what if I allowed it to be like, oh, damn, she cleans up nice? You know, like, what if I just allowed it to be like, wow, I feel so good about myself because I'm wearing something that makes me feel good about myself. Not something that feels like I'm putting on a monkey suit, but something that really feels both like me and like, again, oh, damn, she cleans up nice, like both. And what if it was like going to a fancy ball? What if I allowed myself, instead of feeling like an imposter, to feel like Cinderella, to feel like, oh, wow, I didn't know life could be like this. What if I allowed myself to just experience a really delicious, like, Disney ball, you know, of this party? And what if people who came to my table were people who were really exciting for me to connect with, and I gave them readings that changed their lives, and they in turn felt so good about that they like wanted to celebrate me, offered to buy me a drink, you know, like were equally moved by the situation as I was. And you know what? I had a wonderful time. And not everything was perfect either, and I still had a wonderful time. There were stressful things that happened, and I won't go too deep into it because I'm reading for people I feel really strongly about. Like there's like a privilege there, like, you know, like reader client privilege, where I'm like never ever going to disclose the personal details of someone's reading, even if I did it in public at a party. That's not mine to share. But there were things that came up that were stressful, you know? And even though that was happening, because I had taken the time to be like, what if I'm like a Disney princess going to a ball? What if I'm like Cinderella going to the ball tonight? You know, like destined to wow everybody and have my moment. And because I gave my brain that thing to look out for, I really did have it. And you know what? I really did have people offer to buy me drinks, and I really did give good readings that I know hit for people. And I really did feel really good about how I looked, and I really did like have that romantic experience that I was looking for. So I'm going to encourage you to open yourself up to delicious possibilities, because no, they won't look exactly like you think. And no, it doesn't mean that bad things won't happen. But I will tell you, my mindset when I had primed my brain to give myself a romantic night, it did. And yeah, bad stuff still happened. And it just wasn't like, because my brain wasn't looking for it as the important stuff. My brain wasn't like, oh, ooh, stop everything, halt the romance. You know, my brain was just like, oh, look at that. Like, whatever, you know, like whatever it is. Oh, like this is someone who's come to my table a little bit drunk and I'm going to have to rein them in, you know, like, okay, you know, like, oh, this is, you know, like an uncomfortable social interaction and I'm going to have to navigate through it. Oh, you know, like this is a reading that isn't going exactly the way I'd like it to go and I'm going to have to navigate through. But my brain wasn't ready to go into crisis mode. My brain was like ready to have a romantic night. And so what happened was I just had a feeling that I could get through it, and I did. So it's amazing what happens when we prime ourselves to have a good experience. It doesn't make us less capable of handling the struggles. In fact, the opposite is true. So try this at home. Give yourself a morning ritual or an evening ritual, whatever, to prime yourself for a deliciously romantic and whimsical day. Try one of the things I've discussed. Try 3 of them. Give yourself 45 minutes and try each of them for 10-15 minutes and just see what happens if you try this for a week. I would love to hear about this. If you do this, tag me on social media. Let me know what your morning ritual is like. Let me know how it works for you, or email me, whatever. This brings me to thank you for spending time with me today. You can get in touch with me all over the internet. My name is Rorie Kelly, and you can find me on social media at Sassafras Tarot. I chose 2 words that are hard to spell for my handle, so let me spell it for you. SassafrasTarot. Sassafras Tarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads. I've been on Threads lately. I exist on Twitter, but I've kind of moved away from Twitter because it's become a hellscape, but I have found a home in Threads, so follow me there. If you would like to order a reading, you can do so at etsy.com/shop/Sassafras Tarot. You can also visit my Linktree, linktr.ee/Sassafras Tarot, for all of these links in one place. If you like this podcast and you'd like to support it financially and unlock exclusive benefits, you can do that at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 a month or more. Patrons get access to things like extra content, personalized tarot polls, a witchy Discord community, and more. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, you can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com. And if you liked this and if it meant something to you, I would just love it if you would rate and review it wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps. It really is a free, easy way to help a podcaster. It really means a lot. Having a personal review with like, oh, this is what I liked about this podcast. It helps people make a decision about what they're going to listen to, and it helps me find the people I'm meant to find. So that would really mean a lot. Or if you like it so much that you want to share it, I'd be very grateful to that. Or tag me if you decide to do some of these practices and see how they work in your life. Tag me, like put it on social media. First of all, I would love to see it. I'd love to follow you. I'd love to see your journey. And secondly, like that signal boost, especially with this episode of like just bursting open the doors to romance and whimsy as a way of life. It would make me very, very happy. Thank you so much for spending time with me. If you are a patron, you're getting this episode a little early. If your card pulls in your bonus episode will be coming in a few days, a little later in the week. I have time today to record the main episode, and a couple days later I'll be recording the rest of the content. Spoiler alert, patrons, you are getting a bonus episode that is going to have a meditation for connecting with your inner Page of Cups. All right, friends, have a wonderful, it has been so wonderful spending time with you today. It is romantic to me to get to spend time with you all. It's romantic to me to get to put a podcast out into the airwaves, out onto the internets that we all share, and connect with people and meet people I never would have met, who then become friends and then influence me and like help me see the world from a better perspective. It's romantic to me to get to do that. So thank you for participating in my romantic moment. I will see you soon. Farewell, farewell.